How's it going, guys? I'm an avid herpetologist. Welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be going over today the first deck profile I'm going to be covering for the BT12 format, and you know we have to kick off BT12 with my pet deck, Chaosdramon X Antibody. Now, up until this point, we've of course been calling the deck Machinedramon. However, with the advent of BT12 and the introduction of the new level 6 boss monster, Chaosdramon X Antibody, I have very heavily shifted the focus of this deck to lean away from the traditional Machinedramon and very heavily into Chaosdramon and evoing again into Chaosdramon X Antibody. So a lot of card choices I'm going to be going over in my particular list today. May seem a bit unusual, a little out of the ordinary, but I'm going to be kind of covering in the best detail that I can the reasons for my ratios. Now, I've already done some initial alterations for my very first test build for the BT12 format, so we've already made a couple of small changes. So we're going to be going over the reasons for those as well, but we're just going to go ahead and get right into our deck profile. So to begin with, our eggs. Now I know many of the lists that are out there are going to be running copies of Doraemon, the X Antibody egg. However, I'm actually choosing to run 4 copies of Hotmon. Now there's a couple of reasons for this. The list that I'm going to be running is going to be running 6 Tamers in total. We are going to have our 4 Analog Man plus 2 Tamers additionally, and that plus 1000 DP is going to help our regular Chaosdramons get over a couple of thresholds they may not be able to get over otherwise. I'm actually only going to be running a single DP boost inheritable on my level 5 Cyborgs, so I want to make sure that my regular EX3 Chaosdramons can hit 13,000 DP consistently. Not only is that going to help with one of the rookies that we're running, but it's also going to make sure our Chaosdramon are able to trade or swing over enemy boss Digimon. 13,000 DP is very quickly becoming kind of the norm, the average that a boss monster needs to be able to reach in order to succeed in combat, the modern meta. So Hotmon is going to help us get there. So we're going to be playing 4 copies of Hotmon just because it synergizes well with the other card choices that I'm going to be covering momentarily. So moving right on into our rookies, we are going to be playing 4 copies of Doraemon. Now this is the Doraemon with the inheritable, where anytime a source is tucked underneath your stack, you are able to gain a memory. This card synergizes stupidly well with the new Chaosdramon X Antibody, since the new Chaosdramon X will let you tuck any machine or cyborg from your trash into your sources at the beginning of every main phase on your turn. So basically every single turn that you have Chaosdramon X Antibody in play, as long as it has Doraemon in the stack, you get a free memory to start the turn, which basically means your boss monster is also a memory tamer, which is pretty ridiculous. So Doraemon is super, super powerful. It's also super valuable for making sure that we can go into our regular old EX3 Chaosdramons, hopefully without passing turn. I am, as I mentioned, playing 2 Tamers outside of Analog Man. Those are both memory setters. So ideally, with Doraemon in the stack and my memory setter in play, we can evo into our EX3 Chaosdramon without passing turn, which means we're going to be able to attack after we have de-digivolved and tucked valuable inheritables. So this is also going to be really, really important for our consistency, being able to go into our level 6s without actually having to pass, which is of course going to give us the opportunity to actually punish our opponents after making our big finale play with our level 6s. Now the other level 3 that I am also actually playing 4 copies of is going to be 4 copies of the promo Sunrisemon. Now initially starting with BT12, I was playing 3 copies of Sunrisemon and then 3 copies of EX1 Hagurumon. I have since raised Sunrisemon to 4 copies and cut EX1 Haguru down to 2. In a lot of my testing, there were so many games where I would just find that I had Hagurumon in my hand when I started and not another rookie, and I felt disappointed almost every time. If I'm evoing and raising, I really just want at least one of these 2 in the stack because it raises the power ceiling for those stacks by such a wide amount. So Sunrisemon has 2 effects that are actually both relevant in this deck. The inheritable, while this Digimon is black and has 13,000 DP or more, it gets security attack plus 1. So that's again where our Hotmons are going to come in handy. We are basically going to make sure that our Chaosdramons can hit that 13,000 threshold for a free security attack plus 1 pretty much any time that we are building straight up out of raising, which is super, super nice. It also has a really relevant in-play effect where on your turn, your black Digimon with 13,000 DP or more also gain piercing. Now, piercing is something I've kind of undervalued in Machinedramon in the past, but it's definitely something that is super helpful right now, where I'm basically trying to not only control the board, but also push for games super, super quickly. This build is going to be very aggressive in the amount of trashing and security checks it's able to do. And Sunrisemon is going to help that significantly. So both of these are going to be super valuable for my tech plays when I'm going to be building my early stacks, as well as follow-up stacks to help me close the game out. And we are, of course, still going to be playing 2 copies of Hagurumon. The in-play to trash a card from your hand and draw 2 is still very valuable. Trashing that machine or cyborg. Being able to dig while you're building your stack and raising, being able to do things outside of raising and kind of set up without having to push forward if you're not ready to yet. It's all super helpful. It's still good for loading trash, finding pieces you may be missing. So we are still playing 2 copies, and I may bump it back up to 3 at some point. But for now, this is the list that I'm currently working on. As you guys, I'm sure, already know, Machinedramon especially does tend to change as the metas progress and kind of form and shape, because we are going to be responding to what the top decks look like. But for now, this is the list I'm going to be entering into week 2 of BT12 with. So moving up into our level 4s, I've been playing a pretty consistent suit now for a little bit, and that's going to be 4 copies of Guardramon. Guardramon is still one of the best champions to run in Machinedramon. That inheritable is still one of the absolute best things you can be doing. Plus, now that we have Chaosdramon X Antibody, we can officially tuck these underneath our stacks after we have already evoed out with potentially a different champion. So that's going to be super helpful. The other big reason that Guardramon is now even more valuable than before is if you're building around Chaosdramon X Antibody, Guardramon is going to give us the chance to dig for our follow-up Chaosdramon X plays if we don't already have them, while still being able to go into our regular Chaosdramons. So Chaosdramon can start attacking, start digging, start looting, and finding those additional pieces or our follow-up Chaosdramon X plays, while still being Chaosdramon himself, which is already a very scary boss monster. So Guardramon, I think, is even better now that we have a follow-up play to our Chaosdramons, so I am still absolutely playing him at 4 copies. And I am going to be playing 2 copies of Numemon. Now, this is a flex spot that a lot of people kind of go back and forth with. I've had Tankmon in this slot. I've had Nanimon in this slot. A lot of things have been in this particular champion slot. But for the time being, I am going to be playing 2 copies of Numemon. Now, the reason I'm choosing Nume over Tankmon is I'm not running as many Cyborg and Machine synergies as before. So, like, only 2 copies of Hagurumon. I'm still playing 4 Guardramon, of course, but we're not going to be playing quite as many things that care strictly about Tankmon being a cyborg or a machine, so having the cheaper play cost has come in handy quite a bit. So I'm opting for Numemon for that reason. Having that nice cheap Evo is, of course, still super valuable. And the last champion we're going to be running is actually a new card from BT12. We are playing 3 copies of Mercurymon. So Mercurymon is the new black hybrid that has much more utility than Grumblemon before it, which was kind of the old bar, which was just the standard 5 to play, 5000 DP, 2 to Digivolve. Mercurymon kind of takes that and adds some nice utility, which most of the other colors have had access to for a while now. But Mercurymon here is 6 to play, 5000 DP, 2 to Digivolve. Of course, has the hybrid effect to Digivolve onto Tamers, and has an on-play or when Digivolving effect to give any Digimon you have in play blocker, which means in a pinch, you can either Evo onto a Tamer, Evo onto something in play, or hard play it from your hand for a cost of 6, and give something blocker, which is super nice. Of course, you can give it self-blocker, which is kind of flavorful for what Mercurymon did in the anime, but it's also super valuable, especially if you have, for instance, maybe a level 6 stack that has the blocker, or excuse me, the reboot inheritable, but doesn't have the blocker inheritable. Well, now you can give it blocker for a turn, maybe on a crucial turn, reboot, and be able to use that extra utility, which is super, super cool. But just having this ability to kind of swing for game onto memory, just like with Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon, the option card, this is going to be my version of that blitz for game. Spoiler alert, I'm actually not playing any copies of Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon in this list, just because I'm not playing any copies of EX1 Machinedramon in this list. So I, of course, could, in theory, still blitz in EX3 Chaosdramon or BT11 Machinedramon, which I am playing a few copies of, but because I am omitting EX1 Machinedramon, and I'll talk a little bit more about why in a bit, I've chosen to omit the Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon to free up some extra space for some extra champions that can help me stack build a little bit more consistently. So basically, what this card is trying to do is basically give me extra bodies in my level 4 slots, so I will always have something to put down and build my stacks up when I'm able to or need to, while also still being able to play hybrid for game and close those games out once we get into the late game as well. So it's trying to serve double duty and serve both of those roles, which just kind of helps to meld this deck together. So moving up now into our cyborgs, this is of course the meat of any Machinedramon deck, and these suits are changing constantly, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the ones I'm currently running. At the moment, I'm actually running 14, but since we are playing copies of BT11 Machinedramon, I've decided to cut one down. So we're going to be playing 2 copies of Andromon from EX1, 2 copies of Metal Tyrannomon from EX1, and now a single copy of Metal Mamemon from EX1. So these are still super valuable, especially in stack building lists. Being able to Digivolve up, reveal your top 3 at any level 6 machine, which now of course includes our Chaosdramon X Antibodies, while giving the very valuable inheritables of Blocker, Reboot, and deleting something in play with a cost of 5 or less. Very powerful. All 3 of these are still super helpful. I know a lot of lists are starting to cut down to 1 of each. I still like to have at least 5, sometimes even an extra copy of the Metal Mamemon as well, just because, again, if you're building stacks, you may not necessarily have quite as much turbo draw as, for instance, red bases playing Guilmon and Fireballs. So these cards being able to check those extra 3 cards as well as drawing 1 off of Digivolve means we're digging 4 cards just by using them, and that will definitely help set up your follow-up level 6 plays. Next up, we're playing, of course, the debatably most valuable and heritable in the entire deck. We are playing 2 copies of BT8 Metal Greymon. Still just as powerful as always, being able to de-Digivolve and then pop something 3,000 or less on Digivolve. Super nice. Definitely good for early board control. And what is possibly the most broken and heritable in the entire game, if your top card is a Dragonkin or Machine, attack unsuspended Digimon. That is still some of the best board control the entire game has ever seen. It is such a broken and heritable, and I would never consider going below 2 copies. We are also going to be playing 2 copies this format of BT9 Machinedramon, with Hunters and Crossheart being among the top decks, as well as things like Beelzemon now having access to a 3-cost Tamer, Cool Boy still running rampant, and things like Blackwar Greymon. So Machinedramon is definitely at an all-time high stock if you ask me personally. This card should absolutely be run, if not at 2 copies, in every single list. Machinedramon is going to be one of the most valuable tools that we have to help slow down some of those faster decks like Crossheart and Hunters. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of this card. I highly recommend you do the same if you're looking at your Cyborg lineup for your own personal Machinedramon list, but Machinedramon is definitely one of the best Cyborgs to be playing this format. We also are going to be playing 2 copies of BT11 Metal Tyrannomon. This card has really just been an overperformer. It's such a powerful card. And again, now that we have Chaosdramon X Antibody, where we can tuck both of these into the stack a lot easier than before, this card is even better. Being able to trash a security anytime you delete a Digimon on either turn, whether you're blocking, redirecting, or attacking, oh, it's so good. You can absolutely shred through your opponent's security at levels we really had not been able to prior to this card getting released. Extra security checks is one thing. Trashing a ton of security is something different. So this card is super valuable, especially now with so many Tamer-heavy decks like Hunters and Crossheart going around. Being able to trash those Tamers from security, nothing like it. Super good. The on-play when Digivolving effect that'll also suspend things or keep things suspended is also super valuable. Don't underrate that. I've absolutely Digivolved into this or even hard played it from hand, even for that cost of 8, and it has stolen games for me. So make sure you keep that effect in mind as well. It's very good. Now, there are 3 other Cyborgs we're running at 1 copy each. We are going to be playing a single copy of Structure Deck Volcanomon. The only other Security +1 inheritable, again, just to make sure we are having plenty of aggression, being able to shred through our opponent's security nice and quick. We are going to be playing a single copy, as promised, of a DP boost in the form of Metal Greymon from BT1. That 3+3000 inheritable is easily, of course, the best DP gain inheritable we have access to, so we are still playing that. Now, I'm no longer playing Machinedramon from BT6. As I mentioned, since we were playing Hotmon, I wanted to cut one of those just to make room for other more aggressive inheritables, which is why we have our lineup looking the way that it does. And we are still playing our single final copy of Metal Greymon from EX1. It's just as similar as our Sunrisemons in play effects. Being able to give piercing means that we can be swinging into bodies on the opposing field while still pressuring the opponent's security. So being able to be not only a control deck, but also a control deck that can heavily aggress the opponent's security. It really just creates a lose-lose situation where we can push very high aggression while also forcing our opponent to be a lot more defensive. It's a very cool and very unique build, and Machinedramon has just developed into this monster that I can't help but love. Like I've loved this deck even since EX1, but where this deck has gone, it is super fun to pilot. It's even better when you get good with it. And I love that other people are finally kind of starting to turn on to just how good this deck can be in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing. So this list has really been a lot of fun, and I cannot wait to keep playing it in BT12. So moving on into our mega lineups, we are playing 2 copies of BT11 Machinedramon. Now, as I mentioned, we are not playing any copies of EX1, which means we're not going to be able to super heavily abuse the on-deletion effect, but that's okay. That's not the reason that Machinedramon is in this list. Now, when I was first posting lists for BT12, I was omitting this guy. Originally, it was just 1 EX1 Machinedramon, which of course is now cut, and then my 4 copies of Chaos and 3 of Chaos X. I ended up making room for this because as I was playtesting, there were a couple of things I started to notice. First and foremost, when I'm raising up, if I don't have Dorumon specifically in my stack, being able to Digivolve into Chaosdramon from EX3 and not pass the turn can be a little challenging. We basically need a very good setup of both a memory setter and an analog man, or our opponents somehow need to be very generous and pass us a lot of memory in a single turn. So being able to not only have something we can go into without passing turn while still tucking sources, ideally to get an early trigger from our Megadramon inheritable, things of that nature. This Machinedramon really is very nice for setup. So we're going to be playing 2 copies strictly for those setup purposes. So BT11 Machinedramon basically is going to give us the opportunity to have one last little push to mill a bunch of extra cards before we go into our Chaosdramons. Now Machinedramon is also here for another vital reason, and it's one that it comes up in a couple of different matchups actually. Having something to Digivolve into in the raising area before going into Chaosdramon. So that, again, can basically help us go into our Chaosdramon without passing turn. Even if we want to hide back here and not get the on Digivolve to mill 5, just putting Machinedramon in our raising area so we can push forward and Evo into Chaosdramon for only 1 memory basically lets us, again, immediately aggress our opponent in a way that can be vitally necessary in certain circumstances. Being able to punish the opponent as soon as you have de-Digivolved them by 3, that is something valuable, and it is something we need to be doing well. So Machinedramon is going to help set up those plays. We are playing 2 copies strictly to help us set up, and also, of course, dig for other pieces that we need to see, like specific inheritables or the other level 6s that we're playing. Speaking of those other level 6s, as I mentioned, 4 copies of Chaosdramon from EX3. This card has been so good. Like it's such an overperformer. Again, I think people know how good this card is, but ever since BT11, people have kind of been forced to respect the level of tempo swing that this card is able to present in a single turn, and I absolutely adore it. So Chaosdramon, of course, on play when Digivolving, lets you tuck any 3 of your level 5 Cyborgs into as sources from hand or trash, which will trigger your Dorumon, so it'll let you Evo for 1 less. It has the all turns where if it would be deleted or returned to your hand or your deck, you can detach 2 of those materials to keep it from leaving play. Now, Chaosdramon has always been a very powerful card, but the big problem it has had up until this point is once you've gone into your Chaosdramon, you've kind of peaked. I've talked about this a little bit in the interview I did with the fantastic YouTuber Ben, who was going over his Machinedramon list that he brought to Nationals, and quite frankly, his list is probably going to look a lot different than mine in BT12, but again, this is what I'm starting out with. I'm very heavily slanting my list towards favoring Chaosdramon and Chaosdramon X. But the thing with Chaosdramon, as I mentioned, once you've evoed into him, you don't have anywhere else to go. So you're going to tuck your sources, and then as they try to deal with him and he has to detach, well, you're kind of out of luck. After that point, he's just kind of going to hang out there and look pretty. He's still a 12,000 DP body, but that's about it, unfortunately. He can't really do a whole lot else. He really needed something to go into after they had tried to handle him to really hammer home the indestructibility that this deck is supposed to be known for. And the new card from BT12 that really lets us finally achieve that much higher ceiling is Chaosdramon X Antibody. So we need to take a moment to talk about this card because it really does change fundamentally how this deck is able to perform. So Chaosdramon X is 13 to play, 13,000 DP naturally, which is fantastic. 5 to Digivolve, but it can Digivolve for 2 on top of any Machinedramon or Chaosdramon. So if either of these are on top of the stack, you can Evo onto them for a cost of only 2. So, start of my main phase, you're able to place, as I mentioned, any machine or cyborg from your trash into Chaosdramon's sources. That's going to cover Guardramon, Hagurumon, and of course all of our level 5s, as well as, if in case it's relevant, other copies of Chaosdramon or Machinedramon. So if you don't happen to have any other level 5s in your trash, you can tuck one of those if you want. It's any machine or cyborg. So if you just are trying to get an extra memory, for instance, off of Dorumon, then that'll give you the option to do that. So Chaosdramon X has two other super powerful effects. All turns, if Chaosdramon X Antibody would be deleted, you can trash again one of your opponent's security. So add onto our extra checks from Sunrisemon, trashing from Metal Tyrannomon, extra checks from Volcanomon, we can also trash extra security anytime your opponent is trying to deal with Chaosdramon X by deletion. And there will be certain decks that just plain and simple don't have any other way to handle him. Certain red decks like Red Hybrid, decks like Gallantmon, decks like regular War Greymon may not be able to deal with Chaosdramon X Antibody outside of deletion. So basically, if they want to try to deal with him, they are going to ultimately be shooting themselves potentially in the foot, having to trash their own security, which can end up, of course, pushing us closer to a win and that sweet hybrid for game that we have set up. So Chaosdramon X Antibody is phenomenal. Now, not only does it have both of those already very strong effects, but the real linchpin that makes this card so powerful is it also has all effects of the Machinedramon and Chaosdramons in its sources. So what that means is if you Digivolve onto either of these, you will immediately trigger their on Digivolve effects, which for Machinedramon means you'll immediately check their top 5, you'll be able to add any machine or cyborg into sources or to hand, or in the case of Chaosdramon, that's going to mean tucking any additional 3 level 5 cyborgs into your stack. So you'll be getting, hypothetically, you'll be getting 3 sources from your Chaosdramon and another 3 from Chaosdramon X Antibody, which is absurd. What that also means is not only do they have to play around a single Ultimate Flare Triple D-Digivolve, now your opponent is playing around 2 Ultimate Flare D-Digivolves that can easily happen one right after the other. These two cards play around each other and play off of each other so obscenely well, and the fact that it lets you continue to tuck your cyborgs and sources back every single main phase on your turn also means that even if they are trying to handle it, if they can't permanently get rid of it, he gets to keep tucking more lives underneath. So Chaosdramon X Antibody is so phenomenal. Like I mentioned, pretty much this entire list is dedicated to playing around him and Chaosdramon from EX3, really trying to get off that interaction as consistently and frighteningly as possible. So this list is pretty much tailored to these two. That's why we're not playing copies of EX1. That's why we're not playing copies of Attack of the Heavy Mobile. And while I'm sure there will be, of course, lots and lots of lists out there that are playing both of those cards, trust me, give this list a shot. You will be amazed at just how scary these two cards can be on their own. And one of the big reasons that we can afford to do that is thanks to our 4 of Tamer, Analog Man. Now, much like BT11 Machinedramon, I wasn't super high on this card when it first came out, but oh my goodness, has this card absolutely made me eat my words. Analog Man is one of the reasons that Machinedramon has been able to establish itself as such a threatening rogue deck in the meta. So Analog Man's 2 effects. At the start of your main phase, by trashing a level 5 cyborg in your hand, you can gain a memory and draw a card, which means not only is this providing memory, it is providing card draw and helping you dig through your deck to find more sources. This card is great for helping unclog potentially bricky hands. It's great for making sure that we can make our plays without having to pass turn immediately. Analog Man is phenomenal. Now, it is important to mention that as you are getting better with Machinedramon, one of the big things that we do have to learn as pilots is when to drop things to Analog Man and when not to. If you're about to go into a Chaosdramon or you're trying to set up a Chaosdramon play, of course it's going to be a good idea probably to trash a cyborg, put it in trash, replace that card with a new card in your hand, and gain your memory. However, there are going to be circumstances where gaining that extra memory, there isn't necessarily anything more that you can do with it, and you may not need the cyborg in the trash on that turn. Realizing when you want to be throwing cyborgs into your trash and when you need to hold them back is going to be one of the tests to really determine which Machinedramon pilots are knowing what they're doing and which ones aren't. Analog Man is very powerful, but being able to hold back and not throw things away when you know you're not going to be giving your opponent any less memory. Like if they have a memory setter and you know that you're not going to be passing them more than 3, you may as well not go ahead and trash it if you don't have a use for that cyborg immediately, because Otherwise, you're digging through your deck, but you may not necessarily need that memory on that turn. Sometimes if they don't have a memory setter, not being trashing a card to Analog Man could help you choke them. If you're at 1 and you have a 2 memory play, you can set them to 1 instead of going to 0 and then being required to make something more expensive and passing them more memory. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind with Analog Man in that regard. I know I'm going into a lot of detail just for this Tamer's start of the main phase effect, but there really is a lot to take into consideration, and I think the good Machinedramon pilots out there already know what I'm talking about. But if you want to improve as a Machinedramon player, learning how to properly utilize Analog Man's effect is something I would suggest getting good with. Now, the other half of the effect is the real reason that Machinedramon has become so terrifying. On the opponent's turn, when an opponent's Digimon attacks a player, by suspending this Tamer, redirect the attack to a level 6 machine. So basically, every copy of Analog Man that we have in play is another block that our level 6s are able to do. So even if we don't have our blocker inheritables in our stack, as long as we have a copy or two of Analog Man in play, we can basically hose off and stage off any aggression that our opponent is trying to push. So this basically lets our stack of level 6s become an absolute bulwark, a fortress that your opponent is going to have an extremely difficult time smashing through. So this is absolutely a 4 of, in my opinion. I would be, again, very hard-pressed to go below 4 copies of this card. I have absolutely eaten my words. This card is so much better than I initially thought it was. Do I think it still could have been changed to include any Machine or Cyborg in its discard effect? Yes. I don't think that would have power crept the card too heavily, and that flexibility would really have been appreciated, because currently in a stack building list, you need to make sure you're holding up a Cyborg to Digivolve into, as well as pitching the ones that you don't need. But other than that, yeah, this card is phenomenal. It is absolutely worth running at 4 copies. Now, the other Tamer I'm choosing to run is going to be 2 copies of Izzy Azumi. Now, this is the Izzy that, again, is a memory setter, and is currently the only potentially 3-cost memory setter. On play, the only effect that Izzy has is to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. If they're all black, then of course you can gain a memory. So this card is actually, I think, a lot better than people give it credit for. So first and foremost, being able to rearrange the top 3 cards of your deck is an ability that I have undervalued in the past and will not make the mistake of doing again. Being able to set up which draw you're going to hit next, especially if you're not passing turn with Izzy, is just very, very good. Like, being able to know and you know, bring a specific piece that you may be missing to the top, it's super helpful. Now, are there going to be times where you know, are in a tough spot, play Izzy, and reveal 3 cards you're not looking for? Yes, of course, that's going to happen, but even in those circumstances, being able to control which of those 3 cards you hit first can at least give you more control over that situation and try to help you find a way to dig out of the hole that you may be in at the time. Now, the other really, really valuable synergy that Izzy has is if your opponent happens to check Izzy in security. Because here's the thing. Being able to gain a memory on play means that if they check him and you reveal 3 black cards, you're still going to gain that memory. And we're currently in a state for Digimon where a lot of the time, the meta decks are making plays that are efficient down to the single memory. They're going to be making plays at 0. You know, they're going to be making plays where they're going to be kind of relying on exactly 1 memory here and there, and there have been games where losing that 1 memory at an inopportune time can cost people the entire game, especially if you already have a good setup and they were relying on that turn to push you back. And the really bad thing about Izzy is if they do check it and pass the turn, you're not just getting past 1 memory, you're getting past 3, because he is not only passing the turn to you, but he's immediately setting you to 3, which is really strong. So basically, he's not only getting 1, he gains 3 in those circumstances, which is wild. So I'm going to be playing 2 copies of Izzy, adding a total of 6 Tamers in total. Is, again, we're trying to make sure that our Hotmons are going to be always live. That plus 1000 is only active while I have a black Tamer in play, so we're going to be playing 6. And then, of course, we also want to make sure we have plenty of Tamers that we can Evo onto with Mercurymon at any point in the game. If I ever have both Izzy's in play, I'm honestly perfectly fine with just Evoing onto Izzy with Mercurymon at any point, just because that's going to give us, of course, the opportunity to stack build off of something that already has lost its summoning sickness, so that stack could immediately attack. But we don't really need the second Izzy. We only need 1 because they only have the on play, so we're not really losing any additional utility by digivolving onto the other one. So we are going to be playing 2 copies. It's got great synergies with the rest of the list. And the final 2 cards we're playing are going to be 2 copies of Black Memory Boost. Down from 3 copies, which I was playing last format, but this card is still definitely still super valuable. It's still one of the, again, a phenomenal consistency piece. This card's going to be checking for, again, any of our black Digimon. Now, the only 2 cards in the deck we're running that are not black, which I didn't mention with Izzy, but the only 2 cards that are not black are our 2 copies here of Machinedramon from BT1 and EX1 respectively. Everything else in the deck is black. So you can add any of your other Digimon, and as long as you check not these 2 cards with Izzy, you will of course always gain your memory. Basically, this is again a nice consistency piece. It's a great turn 1 where you're going to help find, you know, the follow-up play for next turn, while also stocking that 2 memory, which can be used on a future turn to help push your plays through. So all in all, this list has been doing super duper well. I'm very happy with it. The first locals that I went to during the BT12 format, I went 3 and 2. Now, granted, that was before I made some adjustments. Again, swapping a Haguru into a Sunraiza, adding these 2 copies of Machinedramon, which I did not have initially. But I'm very, very excited to see this deck finally getting the recognition I think it has deserved for a while now. So I am still having a great time with it. I'm absolutely still going to be piloting this deck in BT12, and I hope you guys will join me and join the Machinedramon cult. So with that, I want to thank you all again for joining me here. Again, I'm an avid herpetologist. If you guys are still enjoying the content, I know I haven't posted in a little while. My life, unfortunately, has gotten a bit busy, a bit stressful, and I have not really had the opportunity to make videos as much as I would like. It also doesn't help that I'm taking the time to edit my videos. It's been both a blessing and a curse because it takes videos longer to make, but I'm much prouder of the work that I'm actually creating. So, yeah, if you guys are enjoying the content, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hey, leave a comment down below and let me know if you guys have any questions or comments about Machinedramon moving into the next format. Yeah, I'm sure you guys will probably roast me for not playing EX1 Machinedramon and Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon, but that's okay. I'm still going to be leaving them out for the foreseeable future just because, trust me, Chaosdramon X is worth it. With that, again, hope you all have a great rest of your evening. I'm an avid herpetologist, and I will see you all next time.